What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the first NHL Strategy Show on Stokastic since the 2-week break. I don't know what just happened there. Something's popping up. Need to X out. There we go. We were here 2 weeks ago exactly for the last game, the last slate before the Four Nations break. I had fairly low expectations for the Four Nations, honestly, and it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. It was a great time. Canada-U.S. rivalry renewed. I think this is the strongest U.S. team that they've had in a long time. Makes me very excited for some Olympic hockey. Glad that they didn't have the All-Star game. This was a fun thing. The issue now is some of these players are coming back and getting like 40-hour break before the games. Other people have 2 weeks off. So this should be a pretty choppy hockey slate. As Cliff and I were talking about before the show, we're probably going to have to just treat it like a normal slate and see what happens. But joining me to break it down, Mr. O'Neill himself, Slim Cliffy. What's going on?
Yeah, not a whole lot. Good to be back. Feels almost like kind of weird. Like you have that long of a break. It's, which buttons do I push? Like, what am I supposed to research? Like, which websites do I visit again? But no, good to be back. Yeah, the Four Nations was awesome. Obviously, as a Canadian, I'm very pleased with the outcome. But I mean, except for that one U.S.-Finland game, like all the games were really competitive. And, even with Finland, with all the injuries that they had specifically on the blue line, they made basically every game except for that one U.S. game very tight, very competitive. So it was a lot of fun. But yeah, we are back. There's a lot of injury news on this slate. We'll go from them game by game. Also, keep in mind, this slate is locking an hour earlier. Normally, it locks at 7 Eastern. Today, it'll be 6 Eastern. So, there might be some teams that won't have morning skates and things like that. We're going to get some late news. So, we always say Stokastic members, check out the Discord before lock. It's an hour earlier than normal today. So be there an hour earlier than normal because I imagine we're going to get some pretty important updates in those final 30 minutes before the slate locks.
Yeah, NHL, MMA locking at the same time. Not great for me, but we'll fight through it. Was there an NBA video stream today? I'm not sure, but I believe if there's an NBA slate, there'll probably be an NBA live before lock tonight. You can also check stokastic.com. They have a schedule of the videos coming out earlier or later today. If you do notice, the Stokastic handle in the chat is now sharing 2 links. Obviously, we have our regular Stokastic link where you can sign up for premium. You can use promo code. I don't remember the promo code. What is the promo code? It's been 2 weeks and I forget. If you are looking to sign up,
there's Stokastic 15 for the DFS, right?
That was it. Yeah. Stokastic 15 for DFS. You get 15% off your any of your first subscriptions if you want. But if you do notice, there is an odd shopper link. If you are interested in the sports betting side, and I know we've gotten a bunch of sports betting questions on shows recently, you can click that odd shopper link. It is our affiliate link. Odd Shopper is running a very, very good deal now. You click the link, you use promo code RETURN. That'll get you 75% off your first month of Portfolio EV. And that deal expires tomorrow night. So if you are interested in giving the sports betting side a test run, click that Odd Shopper link. I mean, if you follow Greg Ehrenberg or Nathan from Stokastic on Twitter, they have a bunch of free sports betting threads that they do. They use Portfolio EV for that kind of stuff. If you do want to check it out for yourself, use promo code RETURN. Before we get into this slate, we have a $50 super chat from Wally Balls, who took down the showdown in the final, the Canada-US final game. If I was a betting man and they released winners who is potentially going to win, I probably would have laid money on volleyballs. But a $50 super chat from him. Thank you very much. Took down the showdown in the Four Nations final. Thanks again for the hard work, fellas. A good second. I can as I disconnect.
Well,
where'd I go?
Well, you've lost the video. We can still hear you. Okay. I guess Josh is disconnected for right now.
There I am.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Back. Oh, here I am. What's a show without a little internet issues to start the season? But what I was going to say is I unequivocally can say that I had no influence in helping volleyballs in Showdown. I am not a good Showdown player, but congrats to you. Let's have a good second half, and the internet's back. Classic start to a show.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the $50 super chat. We always certainly appreciate the support. I like Josh said, that showdown was all on you. I wasn't even home. I was out somewhere else with some friends watching the finals. So I know it was all volleyballs, but he's been on a great run here over the last few months in NHL and other sports. Always love to see that kind of success. So congrats. Thanks a lot for the support. Let's hope the final couple months here go just as well.
Yeah, let's get into the slate because now we do have 10 games to break down because DK, for some reason, was like, let's include the 6 p.m. Eastern games. Thanks, DraftKings. And I forgot about dynamic pricing until I was researching the slate this morning, and I was just like, damn, because there's some wild pricing here tonight. But let's get into it. Seattle Kraken with a 2.5 total heading into Florida. The Panthers have a 3.5 total. Matty Tkachuk is out. If you watch the final of Four Nations, it is not surprising that he is missing this game. He probably shouldn't have played at all in that game, but try telling him that. So Florida is going Verhaeghe, Reinhart, Barkov, Bennett, Rodriguez, Samoskevich, Lundell, Bachquist, Luosterainen. Seattle going Benier, Schwartz, Kakko, Stevenson, Tolvanen, Bjorkstrand. Eberle is back with McCann in between Shane Wright. That is going to be a star. Save it for a different matchup because I am very interested to see how Shane Wright responds to arguably their best two wingers on each of his side. Now, without Tkachuk, I think, is it Samoskevich who's moving up to power play one, or is it going to be Bennett? Because I know they practiced with Samoskevich, but I know Bennett wasn't there.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Samoskevich because he was also there before the break as well. Forget, I think there was a game Tkachuk didn't play or was injured partway through or something like that. So Samoskevich was getting power play top time. I assume it's going to be him instead of Bennett. So we got that going for us.
Yeah. So Florida won 21,400 here with an 18.8% top two stack, 6.8% projected ownership. Now, in the grand scheme of things, considering some of these lines on the slate, that's really not that expensive. They'll be going into Benier, Schwartz, Kakko for the most part. They've kind of slowed, like going into this break, they really slowed down offensively. They started slipping defensively. Their numbers are still pretty decent defensively, only 2.4 expected goals against per 60. And it's most likely going to be Decord in net. Barkov, Reinhart, Verhaeghe, Cliffy talked about it before the break. It was probably 3 weeks ago now. Somehow I remember this, but he was talking about how that line specifically was just dumping and chasing a lot more than usual. That's not ideal against this team. It's kind of hard to, in single entry anyway, prioritize Florida 1 here when you have Colorado 1 I don't even think they're $1,000 more expensive here against the Preds. I think Florida one's fine. Don't get me wrong. They're fully correlated. Seattle doesn't have a great penalty kill. They don't take a ton of penalties. It's just not the best 5-on-5 matchup. This isn't the best team to dump and chase against. They're not creating a ton of goals. Their shooting percentage is low. They are controlling the play very well, though. So that's the one thing going for them. They do have positive leverage. So, if I was making 5, 10, 20, whatever the max is here tonight, I'd definitely be considering Florida 1. With the more lineups I'd make, the more likely I'll get to Florida 1. Florida 2 is interesting. They have a very small sample. Looks like 2 or 3 games together, but they are very high event. You get Samoskevich on the top power play unit. Bennett, coming back from Four Nations, he had a very, very good Four Nations, which a lot of people were surprised he was even on the roster. I thought he looked fairly well. I don't mind Florida 2 as a filler. We're not alone, though. 3.4% top 2 stack, 10.1% projected ownership. That's pretty high ownership on a 10-game slate for a filler line. I'm fine with the Samoskevich one-off, 2-manning with Bennett. I don't know if I'd full stack as a filler. I'd probably look elsewhere. On the Seattle side, I'm out on the Beniers Kakko line. Like, going into Barkov, Reinhart, Verhaeghe's just, that sucks. I don't really want to play a Chandler Stevenson line, so I'm not going to. But I will say, of all the Chandler Stevenson lines, offensively, this has a chance to be decent. Am I going to play them? No. And as I said before, Wright, McCann, Eberle does give me some interest here. But this is a pretty brutal matchup, and I want to see them in a better matchup before I'm spending almost 14K in them. So pretty much out on Seattle here.
Yeah, I'm not going to be long on Seattle. I just have no interest in them, really. Even without Tkachuk, Florida at 5-on-5, at least their first and third lines are going to be great defensively. And the one weakness that Florida's had is taking too many penalties / the penalty kill. And Seattle's power play just remains one of the worst in the league. So it's not like they have the special teams that can take advantage of, getting, if they get 3 or 4 power plays or something like that. Anything can happen in a single game, but I certainly wouldn't bank on it. So if you are playing Seattle, one thing I will say is that they didn't run lines with Jordan Eberle. Him being on the third line is just kind of a guess. I don't wonder if Burakovsky doesn't go back to the Stevenson line, because that's where he had spent a lot of time. And then Eberle goes to the third line, and then Tolvanen goes down to the fourth line, because Tolvanen's also spent time on the fourth line this season. It's just guessing. We'll find out at warm-ups, but I don't have any interest in Seattle. For me, it's the Florida side. For me, it's the top line or bust. I don't actually dislike that second line, Bennett, Rodriguez, Samoskevich, but 14,500 for that line feels fairly expensive. We'll get to St. Louis in a little bit. The St. Louis top line's only $300 more expensive. You know what I mean? The Ottawa second line is cheaper. The Kings top line is cheaper. So it's just other spots I'd rather go to. So for me, it's Florida 1 or bust. The issue with Florida 1 is that there are also other spots I think I would rather get to in that price range, right? Toronto 1 perfectly correlated is cheaper. Carolina 1 perfectly correlated is cheaper. Ottawa 1 perfectly correlated is cheaper. Columbus, same thing. Winnipeg, same thing. There are just a lot of spots that are cheaper that are just as good as spots. I don't particularly dislike Florida, but listen, this line is up to almost 200 minutes together this season, and they're at 2.8 expected goals per 60. That's not that good. It's above average, it's good, but for this particular top line, considering how good they were last year, it's not good at all. And I do think not being able to create off the rush, they're not creating off the rush at all, is the big thing. And if you're relying strictly on forechecking to get you 3, maybe 4 goals, it's a lot to ask. So I don't dislike Florida 1 outright. I just think that there are other spots that are cheaper that I would rather go to. So I think I'm just kind of out on this game in general.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And not only is that Florida's second line 14,500, they're coming in with 3x their top 2 stack in ownership. So it's just like, I'm a Samoskevich slappy, but like at 11%, that's kind of a tough sell. Dallas Stars with a 2.7 total heading into New Jersey. The Devils have a 2.8. Of all the New York, New Jersey Four Nations players, none of them really look good except for Jesper Bratt. Hughes looked bad. Kreider, Trocheck, abysmal. Anyway, Hughes and Bratt will be in the lineup tonight. The Devils are running Hughes, Bratt, Palat. Nico Hischier's back. That's big news for the Devils. He's with Timo Meier and Stefan Nason, per usual. Dallas running Robertson, Hintz, Johnston, Duchesne, Granlund, Marchment, Ben, Bork, Dodonov. Let's have Stankoven on the fourth line, sure. You know what I mean? But this is a 5.5 total. The prices are okay. Like Hischier, Meyer, Nason, definitely going to go out against that Hintz line. Hintz line, decent defensively, or decent offensively. I mean, you know, like 190 minutes, 2.7 expected goals per 60, 3.2 actual. Markstrom obviously still not back, but Jake Allen's a viable backup. The Devils blue line is fairly healthy. At 18,600 for Dallas 1, I'm probably saving them for MME only. I don't like stacking against the Devils. I don't like stacking against the Nico Hischier line, specifically when he's with Nason, just because they are so good offensively that they control the play rather well. I guess if anything on the Dallas side, it'd be Duchesne, Granlund, Marchment. Like Duchesne and Marchment have a long history of playing well together. They don't have a very big sample with Granlund. I don't think they're going to hurt them tremendously offensively. The problem is like it's similar to Florida too, right? They're $14,000. This is not the best matchup. So honestly, I'm probably saving Dallas for MME only. And I'm kind of treating the Devils the same way. If anything, I'd go to Hughes, Bratt, Palat at 17K. It's because they're going to avoid, that Hintz Robertson line, which has been decent defensively, honestly. That Granlund, Marchment, Duchesne line. When you're stacking against Dallas, when Sagan was healthy, and you would stack against Duchesne, Sagan, Marchment line. It's the one line that you can get away with. With Granlund there, he's not a great defensive player. So if anything on the Devil side, be Hughes, Bratt, Palat, but this game is MME only for me.
Yeah, I'll start on the Dallas side. We just talked about how that Florida top line hasn't really hit their stride yet this year. It's kind of the same thing for this Dallas top line as well, right? Like last year, Hintz, Robertson, and Johnston, whenever Johnson was on the top line, it was literally one of the best top lines in the NHL, both offensively and overall. This year, it has not been like that. Almost 190 minutes together, 2.7 expected goals, 4 per 60, 3.1 actual goals for. That's not, don't get me wrong, that's not bad. That's, well above average. That's good. It's just nowhere near where they were last year. And New Jersey's typically had a really good penalty kill this season. And Dallas's power play was starting to come alive a little bit, especially with Thomas Harley running things. It's one of those things that's pretty funny. Like the top power play unit struggled basically all season with Miro Heiskanen in there. Dallas's power play, more shot attempts, more shots, more goals since Thomas Harley started running it. And he had some chances there earlier in the season as well. So, I don't really hate Dallas 1. I think I agree with you. I'd probably go to Dallas 2, Duchesne, Granlund, and Marchment, just because, they do. Granlund and Duchesne were creating well offensively before the break. 61 shot attempts, 2.6 expected goals, only 45 minutes together. So like we're talking, was it like 4 games they were there? So I guess it would probably be Dallas too, but I think I'm out on Dallas entirely. But I do have interest in that Hughes Brad Palat line. Now I get basically like the month leading up to the Four Nations break, that line kind of hit a little skid where they weren't really doing that well. I think that's why they're priced at 17K. But on the season, over 470 minutes together, 3.4 actual goals per 60 at 5-on-5. When Jack Hughes, he wasn't scoring a ton, but he was putting up like 4 to 5 shots a game after Christmas. And you mentioned how good Jesper Bratt looked. Like, I thought he looked like one of the best forwards in the tournament period, not just on Team Sweden. You know what I mean? So the fact that they're going to go up against Dallas's second and third lines, mostly, those aren't good defensive lines. Like Bork and Ben are not good defensively. Granlund and Marchment or Duchesne, have not been good defensively. The top pair for Dallas with Thomas Harley and whomever he goes out with, because I imagine he's going to have a couple different partners, they'll be good defensively. The rest, like Brendan Smith, Cody Ceci, Matt Dumba playing with a rookie, like that's nothing to be scared of. I kind of like Hughes Brad Palat here at 17K. The other thing is there's not a lot of lines in that 16 to 19K range, like that mid-price range that you can really go to. The Devils have 2 of them, play either one, but then you're looking at like Chicago, Anaheim, the Toronto second line, the Kings second line, Montreal top line, the Bruins second line. Like there's just not a lot there, right? So given that line has been pretty good at 5-on-5 for the majority of the season, they're going to get great secondary matchups, and there's not a lot to like in that 17K-ish price range, give or take $1,000. I kind of like that Hughes line here, especially where there's no ownership, like 3.4% projected ownership on the top stacks tool, higher than the Hischier line, but they also have the higher top 2 stack, and they're slightly cheaper, which might matter when we talk about defenseman pricing. I kind of like Hughes Brad Palat here. They're the line that I mostly focusing on in this game. If you want to play that Hischier line in Hischier's first game back, no issues. They were a good line. 2 out of the 3 on the top power play unit as well. I have no issue playing them. I just think personally the 5-on-5 matchups really favor that Hughes line here. And I don't think Dallas has named a starting goalie yet. I imagine Jake Ottinger is going to get a game off. So, you might end up facing Casey DeSmith here. So I honestly don't mind the Hughes line. It's the only line I really have interest in single entry.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Colorado Avalanche with a 3.1 total heading against Nashville. The Preds have a 2.9. Colorado, McKinnon and Makar are expected in the lineup. Jared Bednar was just like, they're gonna play. We have games. They have to suck it up. If there's any 2 players that are conditioned for this kind of shit, it's McKinnon and Makar. So, yeah, they'll be ready. They'll be fine. Colorado going McKinnon, Netchus, Lehkonen, Drury, Colton Wood, and then Drouin, Middlestat, Juuso, Parsinen. Nashville going Forsberg, Marchessault, O'Reilly, Stamkos, Nyquist, Svechkov, Novak, Evangelista, Jankowski. Now, I mean, Colorado won here at 22,600 seems cheap. I know before the break, they were dynamic priced against the Oilers at 20,800. That was ridiculous. This also feels kind of ridiculous. 72-minute sample, 5.44 expected goals per 60, 4.97 actual, 23 high danger chances, 4 per 60. It's like people are just jumping to conclusions that the Avs won the trade here, but like we'll get to Carolina. Rantanen's going to be fine. He's shooting 3% since he came to Carolina, but this line is ridiculous. And O'Reilly and Forsberg have a long history together, mostly with Gustav Nyquist. Now they're with Jonathan Marchessault, who's not, a world beater defensively. They've only played about 70 minutes together this season, but they're below league average with expected goals against, actual goals against. You know what I mean? So, I mean, how do you not like Colorado 1 here at 22,600 when we were talking about possibly even considering Florida 1, who's creating 2.8 expected goals in a 200-minute sample? They're $1,200 cheaper when this Colorado 1 line is basically creating double the expected goals, and they're only $1,200 more expensive, 11.6% projected ownership. This is a very good power play spot. It's not a very good power play spot from the sense that, like, Saros has been ridiculous on the PK, but Saros looked awful in the Four Nations. This is a good 5-on-5 matchup. It's a decent power play spot. I'm very much in on Colorado 1 here. The depth of Colorado, I don't have a ton of interest in. Drury, Colton, Wood is somewhat enticing because they're 10,100, 0.2% top two stack, 4.3% projected ownership. It's a lot of negative leverage there, but a two-man of Drury, Colton for 7,400. If you're looking to get expensive elsewhere, I guess you can deal with it, or Drury, Wood, something like that. But really, I don't have a ton of interest in the Colorado depth. On the Nashville side, I don't mind this top line because O'Reilly and Forsberg have a long history of playing well together offensively. Marchessault is a better offensive player than Gustav Nyquist. They're 18,700, coming in at 4.6% projected ownership. They haven't been great in their smallish sample, but I would imagine it starts to improve. I don't think I'll get there in single entry, but they're one of those lines at home at 4.6% that I would consider an MME. They're fully correlated. I don't love them, but I would play them if I was making 20 lineups. If you need a cheap two-man, for me, I'd much rather play Novak Evangelista than like a Drury Colton or Drury Wood or something like that. They have a good sample together. They'll get, the bottom six matchups of the Avs. And while the Avs are a very good defensive team, good goalie, Novak Evangelista, very cheap, and they have very, very good offensive numbers. So Colorado 1 for sure. Nashville 1, I consider the more lineups I'm making. I don't mind Novak Evangelista as a filler.
Yeah. To your point about Colorado 1, they're scoring with McKinnon and Natchez on the ice, 125 minutes together, 5-on-5. They're scoring 4 goals per 60 minutes, which is, off the top of my head, about 60% higher than league average. And their shooting percentage is below league average. Okay? They're generating so many shots and so much quality that they're, in a small sample, they're below league average shooting, and they're scoring 60% more than the league average. Like, they have just been like absolutely nuclear together. Heaven forbid they actually start shooting at like 11% or something like that, because then at that point they're like a mid-grade power play every time they step on the ice. Like, it's just absolutely crazy. There's nothing I'm worried about matchup wise on the Nashville side. Forsberg and Marchessault, they have not been good together this season. Their defensive numbers when they're together are really poor. The top line with O'Reilly there, 2.8 expected goals against, 3.5 actual goals against. Like, that's not a matchup that concerns me. So I'm with you. I really do like Colorado 1. I'd rather play them than Florida. Colorado's power play is what I'm worried about, because they're shooting 30% since Martin Natchez got there. And while I do expect them to be good, 30% is like really excessive. So I do worry about that. But considering these guys are going to play, like, I know they don't want to give McKinnon a lot of minutes. They probably don't have a choice but to give McKinnon a lot of minutes. You know what I mean? So these guys are all going to play like easily 20 plus, probably over 22 minutes. And they've been great together. So I really do like Colorado 1 here. I'm with you. If you wanted like two-man, like a Drury, Colton or something like that, I have no particular issue with that. But for me, this is a Colorado 1 game. On the Nashville side, like, I would probably prefer to play the depth than the stars here. Like, Forsberg's been on such a good tear. 12 goals, 22 assists, 94 shots in his last 25 games. Like, that's just like an unreal tear. So I don't dislike playing them, but you're right. Like, Novak Evangelista have been really good together this season. Svechkov, he's been somewhat impressive in his limited showings for Nashville. So, Nyquist is a bit overpriced, but Svechkov's only 3,100. So, that's a two-man you can put together for under 8K if you want to get cheap. I think I like, and, I'm not super concerned about matchups against the Colorado second and third lines, especially that middle stat line. So, like a two-man of like Novak Evangelista or something like that, I think is perfectly fine. But yeah, this is a Colorado game for me. Colorado won. In particular, like, they have been unbelievably good this season by top 2 stack percentage. They lead the board here tonight, and it's nowhere close. The next closest team is about 10% lower than them. So for me, this is a Colorado 1 game, but I don't hate the idea of Nashville depth if you're playing some expensive, Ottawa or Toronto or whatever elsewhere.
Yeah. Anaheim Ducks with a 2.4 total. Heading into Boston, the Bruins have a 3.1. Boston going Pastrnak, Zacha, Geeky, Lindholm, Marchand, Coyle. Ducks going Vetrano, Terry Strome, McTavish, Gauthier, Fabry, Zegras, Killorn, Carlson. Be quick on the Ducks here. Like, I don't have any issue with Strome, Terry, Vetrano in a nutshell, but it's 16,500. Am I going to play them on the road in Boston? No. If you're MMEing, you get a little bit, sure. The one two-man I don't have a problem with, it would be like Carlson, Zegras going up against, the middle six of Boston here. I don't mind them. Like, McTavish, Gauthier, Fabry have been fine-ish for the Ducks, but it's like 14,500. No thanks. So really, they're kind of priced out for me. On the Boston side, Boston won Pastrnak, Zacha, Geeky, 19,800, 17.4% top 2 stack, 12.2% projected ownership. Now, per stochastic projections, Pastrnak is tied with Nathan MacKinnon for the highest on the night. Pastrnak is $200 more than McKinnon. They play different positions, yada, yada, yada. Before the Four Nations, Pastrnak was on an otherworldly heater. This is an excellent spot to continue where he left off. Do I want a full stack Boston 1? No. 2.6 expected goals for, 3.2 actual in 430 minutes. I don't want to spend 19 and change to stack that. I'm completely fine with the Pastrnak one-off here. He plays a ton of minutes. It's a great power play spot, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have a ton of interest in Boston, too. They just haven't been great together. But if you do want to pair Pastrnak with someone on the power play, I think Marchand is fine. He's expected to be in the lineup after the Four Nations. So really, from this game, it's just one-offs or two-mans. I don't think I'd be full stacking anything.
So I'll start on the Boston side. Here's what concerns me about playing Boston. Is like, in a nutshell, this is a really good matchup for them. Unfortunately, no Charlie McAvoy, no Hampus Lindholm, and Mason Lohrei is a game-time decision. He may be out with an illness. If those three, even if Lohrei's in, Boston's down their 2 best defensemen. If Lohrei's out, they're probably down their 3 best puck-moving defensemen. Certainly their 2 best in Lohrei and McAvoy, and I think you can add Lindholm in there as well. It's like, if all 3 guys are out, who's moving the puck? Nikita Zadorov, Brandon Carlo, Parker Wotherspoon? Like, these guys are puck-moving defensemen. I have a lot of concern about Boston being able to generate offense, and when you're talking about a line that's 19,800, they're almost 20K. Like, Toronto fully correlated, $1,200 more expensive. Carolina fully correlated, $1,100 more expensive. Ottawa, $600 more expensive. Columbus, $600 more expensive. Winnipeg, cheaper. Like, when you're asking me to spend almost 20K when a team's missing half their blue line and all their good puck-moving defensemen, it's a lot to ask. So, honestly, I think I'm kind of out on Boston. It's one of those games where, you know, if McAvoy, even if McAvoy was healthy and Lohrei was in and they're still missing Lindholm, I'd be like, yeah, I think I'm fine. It's fine. They have no puck move. Especially if Lohrei's out, they have no puck movers left on the blue line. They have none. So I don't know, man. I'm kind of out on Boston. If other people want to play them, go ahead. I think they're just considering that line's coming in with double-digit ownership, and there are a bunch of lines between 19K and 19K and above. Like I said, Winnipeg, Columbus, Ottawa, Carolina, Toronto, Colorado. Like, I'd rather pay the extra 3,700 or 3,800 or whatever and just go play Colorado. So I'm out on Boston. Honestly, I think my interest is more on the Anaheim side. The one line I'd really have interest in is Vetrano, Terry, and Strome. The reason is the other lines are just overpriced. It's weird to have dynamic pricing, and Anaheim's expensive going into Boston. But you know, Cutter Gauthier at 5K. That seems insane to me. Trevor Zegras at 5,100 feels kind of insane to me. Mason McTavish 5,100. Like, given what he'd done over the last month before the break, okay. Given what he'd done for the season, like, no. So, you know, at least Terry, Strome, Vetrano had been good together. Since January 1st, 3 expected goals, 2.7 actual goals per 60, like above average offensively, and that's shooting 7.5%, which is below average defensively. Power play time, Frank Vetrano over 3 shots per game in his last 25 games. I do think they're a little bit overpriced at 16,500, but at least they're probably going to play like 17 to 19 minutes, and we have a sample of them being successful together this year. And there's no matchups on the Boston side that I'm particularly worried about. And again, it's another one of those things where, like, in that 16 to 18K range, there's just not a lot there that I necessarily want to play. I would still rather play New Jersey. If I was, MMEing tonight, I would be giving some consideration to that Strome, Terry, Vetrano line. I think it's genuinely the only line I really have interest in this game.
Yeah, like, I get it. But I like 16.5 on the road in Boston. It's like, I'm just gonna go spend $500 and go play the Devil's top line.
Yeah, like I said, I'd rather play New Jersey here. But Swayman's not been good this year. The Boston penalty kill's been bad. They've been average defensively, and that was with like McAvoy and all those guys in the lineup. Lindholm's missed a good chunk. But if they're missing half their blue line,
this
isn't the 2022 Boston Bruins.
Yeah, and there was a game before the break where they were missing all 3 of those guys, and they got steamrolled. I forget who it was by, but they got rocked. Anyway, Carolina Hurricanes with a 2.9 total heading into Toronto. The Leafs have a 2.7. Classic Leafs behavior. Matthews leaving McDavid wide open for the game-winning goal in the Four Nations. He must have thought this was a first-round matchup against the Lightning. Neither here nor there. They are back, and they are playing. Toronto going Matthews, Marner, Nyes, Nylander, Tavares, McMahon. Carolina going Jarvis, Rantanen, Aho, Svechnikov, Stahl, Martinook, Hall, Blake, Kotkaniemi. Now, obviously, Jarvis wasn't at practice yesterday. Neither was Slavin, but they had placeholders. It was fairly obvious. Speaking of Slavin, he one of the best defensive defensemen in the world. That was it was an unbelievable performance from him. This is interesting because both of these top lines, Carolina's 20,900, Toronto is 2,100, or 20,900 and 21,000. We're back. It's 2 weeks. Give me a break. Neither of these teams are as good defensively as people make them out to be. Toronto has been pretty bad defensively all season. If you're going to trade for Rantanen, you're obviously not improving your defense. Now, everyone's saying, Rantanen is just a McKinnon merchant. There might be some truth to that, but Aho is no slapdick center. And Rantanen is shooting, I think, under 3% since he came to Carolina. Yes, his minutes are not, 23, 24 minutes, but they have been playing more leading up to the break. I would imagine with the way this lineup is set up, they're going to pump this top line some minutes. I like Aho and Jarvis. We talk about Jarvis with Stahl having awesome numbers. Like Jarvis and Aho have awesome numbers together. You throw Rantanen into that mix at 0.6% projected. I am interested. The top line for Toronto, not great defensively. Their penalty kill sucks. Carolina 1 is fully correlated. Yes, Stellaris has had a great season, but, I am willing to take a stab on Carolina 1 here. Hall, Blake, Kotkaniemi, I don't have a ton of interest in. 13,100 is just too expensive. I would take a stab at Stahl Svechnikov. I just Stahl and Svechnikov have decent numbers together, but nothing like Stahl and Jarvis. So it really would be Carolina 1 or bust for me on the Carolina side. On the Toronto side, I do have a ton of interest in Toronto 1 as well. And they're only coming in at 3.3% projected because, Aho and Jarvis in a 335-minute sample together this season, 2.6 expected goals against, 3.8 actual goals against. You throw Rand into that mix, it's not going to improve. I feel like when these two lines match up, it's going to be a fair bit of back and forth. Obviously, Matthews and Marner were playing in the championship game not even 48 hours ago. But they have been excellent this season with Nyes. They're fully correlated. Carolina hasn't been great defensively this season. The one thing that they do have is a very good penalty kill, which is why I think I would give the slight edge to go into Carolina 1 here because Toronto just doesn't have a great penalty kill. So I do really like both top lines here. I do think Toronto 2 is in play a little bit, but they're kind of expensive. 17,500, like Bobby McMahon, no top power play at 4,500. It's kind of a bummer. Like I don't mind a Tavares Nylander 2-man, but at that point I'm just going to go play Toronto 1. So it would be both top lines. Don't mind a Nylander 1-off.
Yeah. To your point about Mikko Rantanen shooting 4.8% so far with Carolina. His 3-year average the prior 3 seasons was 16%. So,
it's coming.
Let's pump the brakes on who won and lost the trade. They've been generating extremely well. 3.4 expected goals, 77 shot attempts per 60 with Aho and Rantanen on the ice. The big thing as well is, except for I think the one game right before the break, is Aho had pretty consistently been playing like 20, 21 minutes since Rantanen got there, where, he was getting more ice time, generally speaking, than last year, but it wasn't a lot more. And, there's a difference between playing 19 to 20 minutes and, around 21. Like those little things matter. We also talked about how Rantanen's price would have to start coming down because it was 8,500 when he was in Colorado. Well, it's down to 7,100 now. Like that's a little bit more about where he should be given the change from Colorado to Carolina. Toronto has a mid penalty kill at best, probably below average, depending what you're looking at. So this is a good power play matchup for that Carolina top line. I'm not super concerned about any of the matchups on the Toronto side. Like the Toronto top line, 2.6 expected goals against, 3.2 actual goals against. The Toronto second line, just Tavares and Nylander, 2.7 expected goals against. Like those are all below average numbers. I'm not super concerned about, I'm not super concerned about any matchups on the Toronto side. So I think all things being equal, I would also lean to Carolina 1. At their price, though, like kind of rather just pay up and go play Colorado instead. You know what I mean? So if I was 20 maxing and I wanted to get something different from Colorado, I think that's where I start considering them. I would rather play them than Florida, I think. I'd rather play them than Toronto, but they're just not my favorite amongst those 20K plus lines. But, they do have almost no ownership. So it's definitely one of those high upside, low ownership plays that if you're 20 maxing and above, that I think you should definitely consider. Carolina 3 is interesting to me. Like, you're right, like that Carolina third line was really good with Seth Jarvis. I think him getting moved up to the top line is just more about getting that top line going a little bit. Just because they hadn't been scoring a ton before the break, even though they were generating pretty well. But with small sample with Svechnikov on that third line, 3 expected goals per 60, 3.7 actual goals per 60. Like, that's pretty good. Not worried about any of the depth matchups, certainly from the Toronto side. They are a little bit expensive, I would say, for a third line. But, Martinook and Stahl are going to play 14, 15 minutes. Svechnikov probably around 17 because of the power play. 12,400, not a ton of ownership. I think it's one of those filler lines I don't mind playing here tonight. So while I kind of like Carolina 1, I think I'd rather just go play Colorado. We'll talk about other expensive lines later on the board, but I think Carolina 3 is a filler. It is where my interest is on the Hurricane side. Now, on the Toronto side, we usually say it's tough to play Toronto stack without Nylander. I think given how good the Carolina penalty kill is, and it is one of the 3 best penalty kills in the league, that this is one of those situations where I don't mind playing a Toronto stack without Nylanders. And, that's why I don't hate the idea of Matthews, Marner, and Nyes. They've been really good together this season, 3.3 expected goals, 4 actual goals per 60. At the low end, Nyes will probably play 19 minutes. At the high end, Marner, 22, Matthews somewhere in between. At 21K, again, that's one of those things I'd rather just pay up and go play Colorado. But, multi-entry, I think that's a different consideration. I would probably rather play Carolina than Toronto, but I think both lines firmly in play. But generally speaking, the way that I'm thinking about building my lineups here tonight, and the lack of really good filler lines here because of the pricing, I think Carolina 3 might be my favorite line in this game.
That's fair. Maybe you'll get Svechnikov going though too, because Stahl is one of those centers that will set you up nicely.
Yeah.
Montreal Canadiens with a 2.5 total heading into Ottawa. The Senators have a 3.1 total. On the Senators side, Tkachuk and Sanderson are game time decisions. You couldn't pick two more important players from this game on the Sens side to be game time decisions. If he's in, they're going to go Tkachuk, Stützle, Giroux, Batherson, Grieg, Perron, and then Amadio, Highmore, Ostapachuk. I don't even know why I mentioned that line. But Montreal going Caulfield, Suzuki, Slavkovsky, Line, Doc, Newhook, Gallagher, Dvorak, Anderson. Here's the issue. Even if Tkachuk plays with Stützle and Giroux, they're 20,400. They haven't created anything together this season. At that point, I'm spending the extra 500 for Carolina 1, the extra 600 for Toronto 1, or I'm just straight up going to Colorado 1. Because, at 20,400, I'm not super interested. If he's out, I don't have interest in the Sens. I probably have more interest in the Montreal side. So I'm probably just out on Ottawa here. Like a one-off Batherson's fine. Something like that. One-off Stützle, sure. But it kind of hinges on whether Tkachuk and or Sanderson play or don't. And I really don't have a lean here. So it's not one of those things in single entry that I'm going to sweat over. I'm probably just going to move on. On the Montreal side, Ottawa's a pretty good defensive team. Now, if Sanderson's out and Tkachuk is out, that kind of changes it a little bit. Caulfield, Suzuki, Slavkovsky at 16-4, I have interest in. I'd rather play them than the Anaheim top line for $100 less. Which is insane to say. That Montreal 1 is $100 less than Anaheim 1, and they're fully correlated. If Tkachuk and Sanderson's out, I'd probably be more likely to play them. But again, it's hard to break down this game unless we know if Tkachuk and Sanderson are in, and we won't know until warmups.
Yeah, I will say I think Sanderson has a much better chance of playing than Tkachuk. Like Tkachuk, it's well known he was injured. Like both brothers were playing injured.
Yeah.
Tkachuk Brady took that spill into the post, didn't practice. He's basically like a game time decision for the final. I mean, we knew he was going to play, like unless he was like literally missing a leg, like that guy was going to play in the final. But the other thing is that there are a lot of teams that play tonight that also play tomorrow. Ottawa's not one of them. They don't play again until Tuesday. So it's one of those things where I wonder, like, because it's Montreal, like they're at home against a non-playoff team. Do they give them the night off, give them a few extra days of rest, and then they can bring them in Tuesday? I mean, we're not going to know until warmups. And the other thing is this is a 7 Eastern start, which means by the time we do find out, Florida will have locked, Colorado will have locked. So 2 of the expensive lines that you might pivot to are not going to be options if Tkachuk is out. Now, there are other expensive lines you can play. We just went over Carolina and Toronto. We're going to talk about Columbus in a second. Like, there are pivots, but it cuts down your options. So where you mentioned that they're not creating much, that Ottawa top line, over 120 minutes together this season, 2.5 expected goals, 1.9 actual goals per 60. Like, even if they were shooting league average, they'd be at under 3 goals per 60 minutes. Like, they're just not creating a ton. So, Montreal is not a good defensive team, and their numbers took a big slide, especially after Caden Gooley got hurt, and Gooley's going to be out again. So, like, it's not that I'm necessarily worried about the matchups. It's that this Ottawa line hasn't been very good anyway, and I have to risk, swapping off the Tkachuk line because maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't, and it's a later lock. So I think I'm kind of out on Ottawa. Like, I don't begrudge anybody that would want to play them. I just think like this is a matchup where they really have to get there on the power play. Montreal's penalty kill, Montreal's still taking a lot of penalties. Ottawa's drawing a lot of power play, so they can get there. But I hate relying on a matchup just because of a power play differential. So like I would rather go play Colorado or Carolina or Toronto, something like that. So I'm out on Ottawa. My interest is on that Montreal top line. Again, just because there's not a lot in that price range. We talked about New Jersey a little bit earlier. They're certainly in the price range that I'm considering. You mentioned Anaheim. Like, that Anaheim top line being more expensive is just absolutely nuts. Montreal won for all the problems the team was having. That top line was still at 3.3 goals per 60 in the 5 weeks leading up to the Four Nations break. Like, they were still playing pretty well offensively. They just weren't that good defensively, but for DFS, all we care about is offense, and they've been a lot better than the Ottawa top line. So basically between them and New Jersey in that 16 to 18K range for lines that I'm really kind of considering here, it's one of those things where I don't know if I would necessarily be in on Montreal, because you're right. Ottawa is really good defensively. If Sanderson and Tkachuk both play, they had basically a full lineup. Other than Josh Norris and Shane Pinto. Norris, it's not really that big of a loss defensively. Pinto, I think maybe you can make an argument, but either way, it changes the top matchups, and that would take me out of Montreal. And if you're looking elsewhere on the slate, there aren't a ton of pivots to go to, but I do like the Montreal side better than Ottawa here, considering the alternative options in the price ranges of the lines that you might want to play. So Montreal won for me, not so much in on the Ottawa side.
Yep. Oh, let's get to the holy moly. Chicago Blackhawks with a 2.9 total heading into Columbus. Our Blue Jackets have a 3.5 total. Kirill Marchenko is playing. That's insane. Like, it's been like 2 weeks since he's gotten surgery on his jaw. Like, there's no way he's eating actual food yet. Like,
no, they said because they didn't have to wire, he's been eating normal food basically since a few days after it happened.
Oh, I didn't realize that they didn't have to wire. That's lucky for him.
Yeah, they didn't have to wire it. He's been eating solid foods, I think they said, for like the last week or last 10 days or something like that.
Yeah, he's wearing a rather large cage. He kind of looks like the Predator, but he's going to be playing. with his boys, Voronkov and Fantilli. I forgot about dynamic pricing, like I said this morning, and I loaded up the centers, and it's just like McKinnon, Matthews, Eichel, what? He's 7,400 here tonight. Then I was like, dynamic pricing. Fantilli, Voronkov, Marchenko, 20,400, 11.5% top two stack, 2.9% projected ownership. Now, I will say, I would rather play Columbus here than Ottawa one, even if Tkachuk is playing. This is probably the best 5-on-5 matchup on the board. Chicago 5-on-5, absolutely abysmal. It doesn't matter the matchup. I don't care who they're matching up with. It does not matter to me. Fantilli, Voronkov, Marchenko are going to have the run of the play when they're on the ice. And most of the time they go out on the ice, they're with Werenski, who we'll get to defenseman at the end. Very underpriced. I do like Columbus one here. They're $2,400 cheaper than Colorado one. It's a question. It's like, they're $500 cheaper than Carolina one, $600 cheaper than Toronto one. I like, outside of the sticker shock on Fantilli, I honestly don't mind them because this is an elite 5-on-5 matchup. So I think they're viable in any format here. Specifically with them getting under 3% projected ownership. I think they're an interesting contrarian play here. Boone Jenner is back on. This will be the first game back on the season for him. He's with Ken Johnson and Cole Sillinger. They're coming in twice their top two stack percentage at 15.4. That's just way too expensive. I want to wait and see what's going on. It's a great 5-on-5 matchup. Don't get me wrong, but 15,400 is a bit ridiculous there. So it really would be Columbus one or bust. On the Chicago side, I really just wanted to X them out, but they have a 2.9 total. And Bedard and Donato, honestly, they've been playing really well together leading up to the break. Leonard and Slaggert being there is not exactly, let's go play them. But, like, I don't mind a two-man of Bedard and Donato. Let's not pretend that Columbus is some great defensive team. They're kind of shit. And, Chicago one's in that 16 to 19K price range where there aren't a lot of options. They're $400 more than Montreal's top line, $300 more than the Ducks top line. I think I would rather play Bedard Donato than the Ducks. If Tkachuk and Sanderson out, I think I prefer Montreal, but I don't mind Chicago one here, but this is a Columbus one game.
Yeah. Just to kind of highlight how good that Columbus top line had been, 60 shot attempts, 3.3 goals per 60 and 235 minutes together, all in the top power play unit. Basically all skating over 20 minutes a game. Even Dmitry Voronkov in the 14 games since Sean Monahan got hurt, he was like 2.7 shots per game. So like even Voronkov, who's the guy that on that line that typically doesn't shoot a lot, he's more the net front guy. Even he was getting a lot of shots on goal. So yeah, they are expensive at 20,400. I would also rather play them than Ottawa, especially where they're projected for lower ownership. And I don't know how the matchups are going to go now that Boone Jenner is back. I could honestly see them sending out Boone Jenner and Cole Sillinger and shut down matchups. But like if Fantilli goes out against that Bedard line, like the Bedard line, 2.6 expected goals against with Slaggert there, that's below average, and that's probably the best defensive numbers that Ed Bedard line has had this season. And it hasn't been a big sample. Yeah, it hasn't been a big sample. So I do like Columbus one here. Once you get above 20K, you got to kind of pick and choose which line you want to go with. Like, even though they are more expensive, I would still rather go play Colorado. It's $2,200 more. Considering that their top two stack percentage is more than double that of Columbus's. But, I'd rather play Columbus than Florida. I'd rather play Columbus than Ottawa, as you mentioned. Probably rather play them than Toronto, to be honest, just because Toronto's in such a bad power play matchup. Not that Columbus isn't a good one, but you typically don't stack Columbus for the power play anyway. So Columbus won for me. They're not my favorite of the expensive lines, but they're not my least liked either. On the Chicago side, again, this is a spot where it's top line or bust. Bedard and Donato have created well offensively this season. With Slaggert there, we should know 59 shot attempts, 2.8 expected goals, 3.7 actual goals per 60. It's only in 50 minutes together. So we're only talking 5-6 games of ice time. It's not a lot, but there has been some good there to start with. And, Columbus, not a great defensive team. Regardless, what does worry me, I was looking at Chicago's power play numbers. With Bedard, Donato, and Seth Jones on the ice for the power play, Chicago's shooting 42%. half that number, I would say they're due for some negative regression. So once that power play regression starts kicking them in the teeth, I have a lot of concern about what the production is going to look like. So that's what worries me about stacking the Chicago side. It would be Chicago one for me, but at 16,800, I'd rather go play New Jersey. I'd rather go play Montreal, especially if we get news on Kachuk and Sanderson. So I just think that there are other lines in that price range. For me, this is a Columbus game, and it's Columbus one for sure.
Winnipeg Jets with a 3.1 total heading into St. Louis. The Blues have a 2.9. Morrissey and Hellebuck are out tonight from the Four Nations. Kyle Connor will be in because USA scratched him for Chris Kreider for some reason. Anyway, we don't have time for that nonsense. Winnipeg going Connor, Scheifele, Velarde, Ehlers, Perfidi, Nemestikov, Niederreiter, Lowry, Appleton. Cliffy and I had a little bit of a back and forth this morning on the Winnipeg top line. Without Josh Morrissey, their numbers fall off a cliff. It's very similar to Vancouver with and without Quinn Hughes. It's not as drastic, but it's pretty horrifying. I'm probably out for that reason on Winnipeg one. It's pretty stark. I don't really have interest in the depth. I will say that third line being back together, Lowry, Niederreiter, Appleton at 10,700 would give me some interest if you're going super expensive power play somewhere else. It would probably be like Lowry, Appleton 2-man or Lowry, Niederreiter 2-man, something like that. But other than that, I'm out on Winnipeg. It's the St. Louis side that I have interest in. Now, yes, Hellebuck's out. Eric Comrie's had a very good season. He is one of the best backups in the league. But again, he's not Connor Hellebuck, and they're missing Josh Morrissey, which is a massive loss on the blue line. It's just a matter of which St. Louis line you want to play because both the Kyrou line and the Thomas line are 14,800. The deciding factor to me is Kyrou, Shen, and Holloway are fully correlated on the Justin Falk unit that has Jake Neighbors on it. If I have a Jake Neighbors unit as the net front in a decent power play matchup, I want to stack that unit, and that is Kyrou, Holloway, Shen. Now they're coming in with 9.1% projected ownership compared to 3.4% projected ownership for the Thomas line. If you're one of those people who sweat profusely about ownership and you want to go to Thomas, Buchnevich, Neighbors, that's fine. But for me, I prefer Kyrou, Holloway, Shen.
Yeah, I'll start on the Winnipeg side. I'll just mention the numbers that you were talking about. This season, when the top line or when Connor and Scheifele are on the ice with Josh Morrissey, it's 3.9 goals per 60. That's about 65% better than the league average, roughly. When they're on the ice without Josh Morrissey, it's 2.4 goals per 60, which is about league average. If you look over the last 2 years, 3.5 goals per 60 with Josh Morrissey on the ice, which again is probably about 40 to 50% off the top of my head, better than league average. With Josh Morrissey off the ice, it's 2.2 goals per 60, which is below league average. This has been a league average offensive line over the last 2 years at 5-on-5 without Josh Morrissey on the ice. That is a concern. The one saving grace here is that this is a great power play spot. Low key, St. Louis has had arguably the worst penalty kill in the league for a while now.
It's true.
If you go back to Thanksgiving, so we're talking 10 weeks of game action in that time. If you go back to Thanksgiving, the only team killing off fewer than 70% of their penalty kills is St. Louis at 65.3%. The next closest team is San Jose at 70%. This team has been absolute ass on the penalty kill. Now, how much is Josh Morrissey responsible for the top power play success? I think is a fair question. Neil Pionk is no slouch offensively. His problem is typically on defense. So I think he can do an adequate enough job, especially in a power play matchup that is this good. That is the one saving grace for the Winnipeg top line. But at 19,300, like, I'd probably rather just pay the extra 1,100, go play Columbus instead. At least they have Zach Werenski in the lineup. You know what I mean? So I think I'm kind of out on Winnipeg other than that third line. If you need a cheap filler stack, I think they're okay. They are coming in like 4% ownership, which is a little high for a third line on the road with a 3.1 total. But I think they're fine enough because there aren't a lot of cheap lines. So I think Winnipeg 3 is my only interest. On the St. Louis side, generally speaking, Kyrou, Holloway, and Schenn has been the better line of their top two lines. But Thomas Buchnevich and Neighbors have scored 3.8 goals per 60 in their time together under Jim Montgomery. Thomas and Buchnevich have, leading up to the break, were playing around or over 20 minutes a night. They're coming in with a lot less ownership too. So 3.4% against 9.1% for the Kyrou, Holloway, Schenn line. I don't have anything against either line. I think both are very much in play here. I think especially where, if you are pairing them with an 18 or 19K line that is coming in at like 6-7% ownership, I don't think ownership is that big of a deal. So in that sense, I'd be fine playing Schenn, the Schenn line. But Thomas Buchnevich and Neighbors coming in with a lot less ownership is what appeals to me. But generally speaking, I'm interested in the St. Louis side here more than the Winnipeg side. I'm interested in the Thomas Buchnevich Neighbors line specifically, but I think both St. Louis top two lines are in play here.
We differ there. I do like the Thomas Buchnevich line. I just I like the Jake Neighbors power play unit a bit more. But, we'll see. Utah, the Soakers, 2.4 total heading into Los Angeles. The Kings have a 3 total. Mikey Anderson is back. Rest in peace, teams going into LA. Out on Utah. Have fun with that. I mean, like, no, I'm out on Utah. Fiala, Byfield, LaFerriere, 18,300 is kind of sticker shock as well. The one thing I would say is they're probably going to go out against Hayton Genther, and they have generally been pretty good defensively. And you can get Kempe Kopitar Turcotte for 14,300 going up against Kerfoot, Keller, and Schmaltz. Like, Keller and Schmaltz have great numbers together, but most of that is with Hayton or Cooley. You throw Kerfoot into the mix, and they're pretty awful defensively. I do like Kempe Kopitar Turcotte here. Obviously, Turcotte, whether he makes it the whole game there or only plays 13, 14 minutes is a concern. But it would be that Kings top line for me. If you do want to go to more Danault Fogle, that's fine, I guess, because they've been pretty good, actually really good in an 80-minute sample. But, like, I'd rather just save the $800 and go against a Alex Kerfoot centered line that hasn't been good defensively.
Yeah, especially with Mikey Anderson back, I'm just out on Utah. This is just a brutal matchup. There's a reason why they have a 2.4 total. So yeah, out on Utah. For me on the King side, like Kempe Kopitar Turcotte are coming in with a fair bit of ownership, 6.3% against a 1.7% top two stack. The low top two stack is because of Turcotte. As you mentioned, there are games he plays like 10 minutes, and by the time the third period rolls around, he's more or less stapled to the bench. That is a bit of a concern, but it is still a, quote, top line that is at 14,300, that is at home in a matchup that isn't that bad. So, generally speaking, they've been fine this year. They struggled going into the break, I was looking at the last 5 weeks going into the break, 2.1 goals per 60 minutes. Not that great. Not good, actually. But they've generally been fine together this season. So Kempe Kopitar Turcotte is a fine, like mid-price-ish, almost filler, but not quite line. Fiala Byfield Laferriere is what's kind of interesting me here. And it's for a couple reasons. One, there's not much ownership on them. 2%, 2.1% ownership, right? 18,300, that is expensive. But this line has been great, right?
Yeah.
3.2 expected goals for, 1.4 against together. Like they've just been crushing. 4.3 actual goals per 60 minutes. Like, and these guys have all been playing fairly heavy minutes. Like Byfield and Fiala around the 20-minute range heading into the break and after Laferriere came back and got moved back to the top power play unit, he was around 18 minutes. So this is a line that's playing 18 to 20 minutes. Even though they're, quote, a second line, they're playing 18 to 20 minutes. You get 2 out of the 3 guys on the top power play unit, and they've been tremendous at 5-on-5. They're not my favorite play in that price range. If you want to go down a little, I think New Jersey is probably still ahead for me. If you want to go up a little bit, I think Columbus is still ahead for me. But I'd rather play them than Nashville. I'd rather play them than Winnipeg. I'd rather play them than Dallas. So I honestly don't hate that Fiala Byfield Laferriere line. 18,300 is expensive. The worry for me is that it's the power play, right? The Kings power play is terrible. It's been a little bit better with Doughty, but without much power play upside, they have to kind of all get there at 5-on-5 or with the empty net, and it's a lot to ask. But honestly, at 2% ownership for a line that's been just crushing it at 5-on-5, I think you do have to give some consideration to that Byfield line.
Yeah, and that's the thing with dynamic pricing, right? Like there's going to be really good lines that are super low owned because they're overpriced. I think that's going to be an interesting strategy moving forward, especially if you're MMEing, because you're going to have to figure out a way for your optimizer to get to these lines. Because like you said, like they're running everyone over. So I don't know. If I was MMEing, I'd be over the field for sure on this line. Vancouver Canucks with a 2.3 total heading into Vegas. The Golden Knights have a 3.1. Eichel, Stone are playing for Vegas. Pettersson got hurt in Four Nations. He's out. Quinn Hughes still out. Out on Vancouver.
The coach I just saw while we were on air, the coach said Pettersson is technically a game time decision.
I'm still out on Vancouver without Quinn Hughes. If you're interested in playing the Canucks here, I would be near a computer to see if Elias Pettersson is playing, but good luck to you if you are. I'm out on them. The Vegas lines are a bit of a circus, but we'll work through it here. Eichel with Olofsson and Barbashev. Stone, Saad, Howden, Hurdle, Dorofeyev, Raphael Lavoie. No, it's Holtz, right? It's Holtz.
No, it's Lavoie.
Yeah, Lavoie. Me and my French accent, I mean, I don't know how to pronounce anything French besides fries. This is kind of a scene like Eichel, Olofsson, and Barbashev have played 30 minutes together. They've actually been really good. It's a very small sample, though. Eichel and Barbashev have a pretty big sample, really big sample. A lot of that is with Stone, though. I think the reason that they're breaking up these lines is because Eichel, Barbashev, and Stone, outside of the first month of the season, haven't done anything. Olofsson is a shot bot, so like I think that line might work. I don't mind them at 15,700, and it's not like you have to stack, the Vegas power play. It just hasn't been great. Now Shea Theodore is out, so that's going to hurt their power play. I don't mind Eichel, Olofsson, Barbashev just because they're 15,700. Obviously, Hurdle and Dorofeyev have been decent together this season, but they're coming in with more ownership than the Eichel line. At that point, I'm just going to go to the Eichel line. Howden, Sod, Stone is weird. And they're coming in at 8.1% projected ownership. They are only 12,000. So for that instance, like, I don't mind them, but like, these lines are weird. And I don't have any faith that they're going to stay together. So like, it would be like Eichel, Barbashev, Olsen, because at worst, if Olsen gets, kicked off the line, you'll still have Eichel with Barbashev. So it would be Vegas 1 for me.
Yeah, I'm out on Vancouver. Like, even if Pettersson's playing, this is the very last game to lock on the slate. It's the only 10 p.m. Eastern game. So, like, if you have Pettersson in your lineup, all of a sudden he's out. Like, good luck with those swaps. So I'm out on Vancouver. On the Vegas side, here's the thing: is I think missing Theodore. I think the biggest problem is going to be the puck moving with the Eichel line off the ice. You know what I mean? Like, Hannafin's good at it. Petrangelo's good at it. So I think they're going to try to have one or the other on the ice at all times at even strength. But honestly, other than those two guys, there's basically no one that can really move the puck well with Theodore out. And I think that's where it could hurt the depth lines generating offense at even strength. But this is still a really good matchup with all of Vancouver's injuries. Demko's out too. Not that Demko had started to play a little bit better before the break, honestly. So it's unfortunate that he's out too. I think I would probably just go to some sort of power play stack, because even though these guys are all on different lines, the four main power play guys, Eichel, Stone, Hurdle, Dorofeyev, are probably going to be 1 through 4, if not 1 through 5 in total ice time, right? So, like, even though, Brett Howden's playing with Mark Stone, I don't really think Brett Howden's going to play like 16 minutes or something like that. Like, same thing with Lavoie. Like, Lavoie on the second line, I don't think he's going to play like 17 or 18 minutes. You know what I mean? So I would do like an Eichel, Hurdle, Dorofeyev, or just like Eichel, Barbashev, Stone. Like, I think that's fine. If you're worried about all of a sudden getting moved off, well, guess who's the number one candidate to get moved onto that line, and who's going to skate with them on the power play anyway. So I think I would focus on the 4 power play guys rather than play any even strength line here. Vancouver, typically their penalty kill has been fine. Funny enough, Pettersson and JT Miller were probably their 2 worst penalty killing forwards. So with Miller traded and Pettersson injured, the penalty kill might actually get better, which would be kind of funny. But I still think the Vegas power play is going to be just fine without Theodore. I think the biggest problem without Theodore is going to be even strength offensive puck movement for the depth lines. But I would just build a stack around Eichel. If you want to play the top line, then fine. But I think I would do like I said, Eichel, Hurdle, Dorofeyev, Eichel, Barbashev, Stone, like something like that. I would make sure I'd have at least 2 guys on the top power play unit. If not, just go 3 or all 4 or something like that. I think I'd focus on the power play guys, but this is a Vegas game through and through.
Yep. Let's talk about them defensemen. Top of the board, Cale Makar, Zach Werenski. Those are the guys above 7K. Zach Werenski, 7,600. Cale Makar, 7,900. Then after that, you have Yossi at 6,900. Thomas Harley, 6,300. Seth Jones, 5,900. I'll throw Chabot in there at 5,800 because if Sanderson's out, he becomes a lot more viable. Not that he wasn't viable before, but Werenski is number 1 for me. Like, he was 9,500 at points this season. 7,600 is only 200 more than Adam Fantilli. Obviously, Makar is fine, but I go Werenski 1, Makar 2. Harley is a tough pass for me because the Devils have a good penalty kill. I do really like Seth Jones at 5,900 as well. If Sanderson's out, Chabot at 5,800 makes some sense. But this dynamic pricing really affects blue liners more than I feel like it affects the lines pricings. Yeah.
Just to put a point on that, like the value that Stokastic projects, it's just points per $1,000 projected. There's one defenseman on the slate tonight above 2.0 projected fantasy points per $1,000. One, and it's Zach Werenski. normally like, a month ago on a slate like this, you'd see like a dozen defensemen above 2.0 projected fantasy points per $1,000. Sorry. A lot of them would be cheaper guys, like guys, the $2,700 or $3,100, but they've all been priced up. So there's not a lot of cheap defense value anymore, which is why, like, I do think like paying up for one of Werenski or Makar, I'd probably rather play Werenski, even though Werenski's the highest projected owned player on the board here tonight, 22.9%. There's no other skater at 20%. But having one defenseman at 20 to 25% ownership on a 10-game slate, like that doesn't worry me at all. So Werenski or Makar, like even if you want to get in Roman Josi or something like that, I think this is a good night to play one of the expensive defensemen. I would go Werenski, Makar, then Josi. But I think all three are very much in play here. In the mid-price range, like Neil Pionk, I think makes a lot of sense with Morrissey out. Like if Winnipeg can break through, especially against a very bad penalty-killing Blues team, like Pionk on the blue line does make sense. Noah Hannafin, he's reasonably priced. He's probably going to have to get more ice time with Theodore out. Same thing with Alex Pietrangelo. Esa Lindell, I don't like his price for 4,800, but I don't like the price of almost every single defenseman on the board here tonight, not named Zach Werenski. So, like, I have to play two of them. Like, I'm forced to. So, Esa Lindell, I think, is fine. I think Seth Jones makes a lot of sense. You're right. At his price, in a good matchup, he can shoot and block shots. So I do think Seth Jones makes sense. And yeah, if we get news that Jake Sanderson's out, then Thomas Chabot for sure. But we're probably not going to get that news until a few of the games have locked. So for the cheaper defensemen, like, there's guys on the Bruins like Andrew Peeke, Parker Witherspoon. Like there are some cheap guys there. Depending what happens with Ottawa's blue line, they said Nick Jensen wasn't at skate either. So like, if Jensen and Sanderson are out, then guys like Tyler Clevin or Mantipalo or whatever are going to have to get more ice time, and they're super cheap. So just keep an eye on whether they're in or not. Other than that, like Liam Bichelle, like Nico Mikkola, Jake McCabe, like Alex Vlasic. Like there are a few guys under 4K, but there's really not a lot. A lot depends on who's in or out of the lineup on the Ottawa blue line.
Yeah, Jordan Osterley, I think, is running the top power play for Boston at 2,800.
Oh, sure.
I think. I can't believe this is coming out of my mouth, but like Mikey Anderson at 3,100, because he's gonna play like 24, 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll trip and fall into 3 pucks. You just don't know. Like I love punching defensemen. Now I can't do it. I'm angry. Let's talk about goalies. Transition to goalies, my least favorite activity on the planet. The top is just the scene. If I'm spending up 8K or higher, it's for Ullmark or Hill. Ullmark is with an asterisk if Tkachuk and Sanderson are in. If not, I'll just go to Hill. Don't mind Blackwood at 7,900. In the mid-range, like I know I said I like Carolina, but for that reason, I also like Stellaris at 7,600. Kevin Lankinen at 7,400 is all right. If Tkachuk and Sanderson are out, the Montreal starter, I would assume it's going to be Montembeault at 7,200. And the two really cheapies, whoever starts for Anaheim and Joey Decord.
Yeah, for the Jeremy Swayman's the top projected goalie, and honestly, it's not even that close. He's over 14 DK points projected. Bobrovsky's the next closest. He's under 13. I don't hate it just because even though I do worry about Boston missing all those defensemen, Anaheim's power plays it sucks. So like the one big weakness Boston has is their penalty kill, and I don't think it's a huge concern for this one. So I think Swayman's fine, but for the expensive goalies, it's Aiden Hill and Darcy Kemper that I'm really looking towards. Now, Kemper hasn't been confirmed yet, but he was back at practice this week for the Kings, so I think he's going to get the start here tonight. So Kemper, Hill, Swayman for the expensive goalies. Going down, like I think Stolarz is fine from Toronto. I again, Carolina, their top line has really been struggling to score. If they don't break out here tonight, I think Stellaris could have a good game. Sam Montembeault, I think, makes a lot of sense. Like all of Ottawa's offensive threat comes on the power play. And if they don't have Kachuk and if they don't have Sanderson, or if they don't have even just one of them, that negates, I think, their one big advantage, because Ottawa at 5-on-5 just sucks. So I don't mind Montembeault. If you want to go down a bit more, I agree with Joey Decord. Like, Florida's top line has not been generating well offensively this season. No Matt Kachuk. The third line isn't that great offensively. So, like, I do think it's not that bad of a spot if you need a super cheap goalie to go with Decord at 6,900.
Yep. We will be back Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday next week with some better pacing. Sorry this one's so long. I'm an idiot. Who are you liking for your hat trick pick?
Our boys are back in town. I'm going to the Columbus Blue Jackets, Dmitry Voronkov.
I'm going to my middle child, my third middle child, Adrian Kempe.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. You got to go to the people you know.
Yep.
But we will be back Tuesday. NHL doing that stupid 1-12, 3-14 type deal next week. After that, it kind of evenly spaces out. Good luck, everybody, tonight. Remember, early lock, 2.5 hours, 6 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you're in the Discord for that. And good luck, everybody.
Good luck tonight, everyone.